Welcome to the Library of Awakening, hosted by CyberX, a space where curiosity meets courage and ideas come alive. Here we explore the thoughts that challenge, inspire, and sometimes even unsettle us, because growth often begins with discomfort. So, welcome to the journey. May this space inspire you to ask questions, explore the unknown, and most importantly, to awaken. This is the Library of Awakening. Alrighty, what is going on, Library of Awakening family? Welcome back to another evening episode. In tonight's read, we're going to be once and for all finally finishing David Icke's Chapter 3, A Guide to the Global Conspiracy and How to End It. This one is going to be a lengthy one as we are going to attempt to try to finish off the remaining portions of this chapter. So without further ado, let's dive in. Make sure that you guys go back and watch the previous two uploads prior to this one, so that way you guys are up to date with the information that we're going to be diving into today. Really great stuff. As always, non opinionated information and research, just reading chapters and books to you guys that we feel like should be brought to people's attention that goes otherwise unnoticed. As always, you guys can always find any of these books shared inside the private CyberX Discord by heading over to cyberxtrading.com. We'd love to have you on the team in 2026. There are literally thousands of books shared with inside the private CyberX Discord and hundreds uploaded on a daily basis. 100 new books, I should say, uploaded on a daily basis. So many, honest to God, I can't even keep up. Without further ado, let's dive in. So, picking up where we left off, after the flood. As the earth began to recover from the catastrophe, peoples who had survived in the higher elevations began to return to the lowlands. Survivors from Atlantis, Nordic or Aryan bloodlines, and Mu Lemuria, reptilian bloodlines, headed for other lands, as portrayed in Figure 37, and they used their advanced knowledge to find other cultures. It is basically here that conventional history picks up, the story of modern humanity, accounts by the Inca people, compiled by Fernando Montesinos, one of the earliest Spanish chroniclers in South America, maintain that there were two distinct Inca empires, one before and one after devastating land upheavals. Survivors who had sheltered in a mountaintop sanctuary, possibly the famous lost city of Machu Picchu, returned to Cusco and the Andes to start again, say the accounts. At least some of the survivors who headed for the highlands may have been warned by the gods, as symbolized in the Sumerian biblical tale of Noah and his ark. This return after the flood is a common theme, and the most significant of these start again societies was Sumer in Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, which we know as Iraq. The Sumerian period is estimated to have spanned the millennia between 4000 and 2000 BC, and is called by mainstream historians the cradle of civilization. They also say that other independent civilizations of great advancement also suddenly appeared in the same period in Egypt, and the Indus Valley, and what is now the Indian continent. And there were others even earlier. Sumer was not the start of what is called civilized society. It was one of the most significant to emerge after the catastrophe that destroyed the Golden Age. Sumer was not the beginning. It was the start over again, which was to become the center of another vast empire. After the cataclysms, culture in Egypt and the Indus Valley also suddenly and unexplainably manifested at a very high level of development compared with most other areas of the world. Historians portray them to be independent of Sumer, but again, they were not. They were part of the same Sumer Empire. See my other books like Tales from the Time Loop and The Biggest Secret for the detailed background. We're definitely going to need to dive into those at some point in time in the near future. Some of the gods returned, especially reptilian ones, and advanced knowledge was given to the chosen few in these societies, especially Sumer. The knowledge was passed on through initiation in the mystery schools, the forerunners of today's secret society network. This influx of knowledge, right at the start, explains the mystery of why early civilizations like Egypt and Sumer, the land of Shinar, in the Bible, began at the peak of their development and then fell into decay. when the normal course of events is to start at a lower level and slowly advance through learning and experience. There was clearly an infusion of highly advanced knowledge that was later lost to most people. For this reason, the earlier pyramids in Egypt were far more advanced than later ones. In every culture throughout the world are ancient stories and texts which describe the gods who brought advanced knowledge, and this would again explain the mystery of how the ancients had a phenomenal understanding of astronomy and many other sciences. The Sumerians were the first known people to study the stars, develop the written word, and enforce a legal code. They were the first people to use the sexagemal system of numbers based on 60 and divide time into 60 seconds and 60 minutes. They also introduced the 12-month calendar. The Sumerians were the first known civilization to have codified legal and administrative systems with courts, prisons, and written records for government, history, mathematics, and astronomy. They established the first schools and intensive farming with wheat, barley, and animals. Basically, all the foundations of what we call modern society started in Sumer, and this was the society and structure given to them by the reptilian gods. It was the artifacts, texts, and records from Sumer and its successors, like the Assyrians and Babylonians, that were so professionally and systematically looted or destroyed after the invasion of Iraq in 2003. These advanced, ancient post deluge societies appeared with tremendous speed after a massive influx of knowledge from the gods. Professor W.B. Emery writes in Archaic Egypt, at a period approximately 34,000 years BC, a great change took place in Egypt, and the country passed rapidly from a state of advanced Neolithic culture with a complex tribal character to two well organized monarchies, one comprising the Delta area and the other the Nile Valley proper. At the same time, the art of writing appears. Monumental architecture and the arts and crafts developed to an astonishing degree, and all the evidence points to the existence of a well organized and even luxurious civilization. All this was achieved with a comparatively short period of time, for there appears to be little or no background to these fundamental developments in writing and architecture. The reptilian gods. The Sumerians left us clear explanations for the source of their knowledge and culture. Their records were discovered thousands of years later, starting in the mid 1800s when tens of thousands of clay tablets were found in the former land of Sumer, on the site of the Assyrian capital city of Nineveh, near what is today Mosul in Iraq. An Englishman, Sir Austin Henry Layard, made the first discovery, and others followed. The astonishing accounts the tablets contain originated in Sumer, not with the later Assyrian culture, and I, therefore, refer to them as the Sumerian tablets. It is estimated that they were buried around 2000 BC, but they tell a story that goes back some 240,000 years to the lost civilizations of the Golden Age. The tablets describe planets of the solar system in both number and environment in ways that were only confirmed in the 20th century, and they show how advanced some of the ancients really were. In more recent times, many books have been written translating the content of the tablets. You don't have to delve into the translations for long to see that much of the biblical Old Testament is a steal from these Sumerian stories. They tell how King Sargon was found as a child floating in a basket on a river and was brought up by the royal prince who found him, the tale later attributed to Moses. They described a great flood in a place called Eden, the abode of the righteous ones. The much later Bible speaks of Eden, the garden of a god. The story of Genesis is a summary of the accounts told in the Sumerian tablets in far more detail. As I mentioned earlier, many of the terms translated into the English version of the Old Testament as God come from words that actually mean gods, plural. And the Sumerians said the founders of their civilization were a race of beings that came to this planet from elsewhere, bringing great knowledge and technology. They called these beings the Ananu. Their later Semitic name was Anunnaki. Those from heaven to earth came, and we've done previous video breakdowns introducing the Anunnaki to you all as our followers here on the Library Awakening for this exact reason, knowing that eventually we were going to dig deeper on this topic. Anana means son or sons of An, later written as Anu, the king of the Anunnaki. The tablets describe how the Anunnaki, later called gods, created a culture of great advancement and technology that was destroyed by planetary catastrophes and a flood. They also reveal that the Anunnaki were a reptilian race, as widely confirmed when you read other ancient accounts. A tablet dating to around 3500 BC leaves us in no doubt as it describes the arrival of the Anunnaki. The reptiles verily descend, the symbol of the Hyksos kings in Egypt, who originated in Sumer, was the snake, and Egyptian royalty in general was very much associated with reptilian imagery. Even academics like Dr. Arthur David Horn, former professor of biological anthropology at Colorado State University at Fort Collins, have concluded that humanity was succeeded by an extraterrestrial race or races, and that the Anunnaki were reptilian. He too believes that these same reptilian entities have sought to control the world for thousands of years, as he explained in his book, Humanity's Extraterrestrial Origins. Today's ruling families also use reptilian and Anunnaki symbolism all the time because they are the Nephilim bloodlines, the result of the interbreeding between humans and the reptilian Anunnaki. The Sumerian tablets include detailed descriptions of how the Anunnaki interbreeded with humans to create a hybrid race, a fusion of the genes, computer programs, of humans and themselves. The tablets, tell of how the original breeding program was headed by the chief scientist of the Anunnaki, called Enki, or Lord of the Earth, Ki, Earth, and their expert in medicine, Ninkarsaj, or Ninkarsaj, also known as Ninta, or Lady Life. Mesopotamia depictions portray her holding a horseshoe-shaped tool used at that time to cut the umbilical cord. Another name later given to her was Mami, from which came mama and mother, or mama or ma, as a term for mother, can be found in various languages all over the world. Ninkarsaj would later be symbolized by the stream of mother goddess deities with names like Queen Semiramis, Isis, Barati, Artemis, Diana, and the biblical Mary. This is where the Virgin Mother and Child myths originated from, and portrayals of the reptilian mother and child have been found in graves of the Ubaid people who preceded the Sumerians in Mesopotamia. These goddess figures also symbolize much deeper esoteric concepts for those at the level of understanding. The virgin birth myths of religion come from the creation and seeding of children by the Anunnaki without sexual contact. There are even Sumerian depictions of the gods holding test tubes. After many failures in some horrendous creations, the tablets indicate that Enki Ninkarsaj produced a human hybrid that the Sumerians called a Lulu, or one who has been mixed, and this would appear to be the biblical Adam. This was the splicing together of the DNA of the Anunnaki with that of the human form known as Homo erectus. Some of these hybrids were designed to rule as the middlemen or demigods between the Anunnaki and the people. It is evident that the gods of Sumer knew about DNA, both from the accounts and the symbols they used of the intertwining snakes or serpents. It has been passed down through people like the Greeks and Romans with names like the Caduceus of Mercury or Hermes, and is used today as a symbol by the medical professions. Figures 41 and 42 up here, that you can see there. The wings at the top represent what happens when the energy, known as the Kundalini, shoots up the spine and out through the crown chakra to connect with infinite awareness. Kundalini is a Sanskrit word that means coiled up or coiling like a snake. And in unconscious people, it pretty much stays like that in the base chakra at the bottom of the spine. Once the mind opens, the Kundalini uncoils and you can fly, hence the wings. I had a massive Kundalini experience in 1991, and when it happens on the magnitude, very heavy boots are recommended. DNA also looks like a snake when massively magnified. What the Bible calls Adam, the first man, is likely to be symbolic of the atom, a genetic type, not an individual. The biblical Eve was supposed to have been created from a rib of Adam, but the word from which rib derived was the Sumerian T, which means both rib and life, according to the translations of author Zechariah Sitchin. To be created from the life or a life essence of the Adamic race makes rather more sense than a rib. In the same way, the dust from the ground, from which the Bible claims that Adam was created, really translates as that which is life from the Sumerian term it. Appropriately, the Sumerian name for the humans was Lu, which has the root meaning of worker or servant and also implies domesticated animal like a sheep. Does that not describe the nature of human life today and for a long time past? The reptilian Anunnaki, who I will also refer to as the reptilians, wanted to create a slave race to serve their interests by, among many other things, mining gold and other minerals, especially in Africa, the Sumerian tablets indicate. Kridu Mutwa told me that many other words in Africa with a Sumer origin relate to mining and going underground. He said that the Bapedi people have the word shuma, which means to go underground, and mashumo means job. The tablets describe how the Anunnaki set out to create slaves, later called Homo sapiens, to serve their agenda. They tell of how the sperm of the Anunnaki males was used to fertilize human eggs before they were transplanted to Anunnaki females to be birthed. All this appears to have first happened hundreds of thousands of years ago, but has continued ever since on various scales. Many of these stories told in tablets refer to events in Lemuria and Atlantis. All this makes more understandable the countless stories told today by people claiming to have been abducted by non human entities, many described in reptilian terms, which forced them to have sex or took their eggs or sperm. The babies that result often disappear in early pregnancy with no medical explanation. There are many abduction experiences that are simply invented or have other more earthly explanations. But to dismiss them all, give their number and often consistency of detail around the world would be just as ridiculous as believing every word of every one. I like that he justifies that. Abductees report experiences with variety of non-human entities, tall blonde people, the classic grays, reptilian types and crossbreeds. The reptilians are described as very tall, 7 feet and more, with scaly green brown and sometimes almost albino white skin, with webbed clawed hands and golden eyes with split pupils. Some are reported to have tails, and there are clearly many different types as with humans. These entities are said to have the ability to control the minds of their victims while various procedures, often painful and distressing, are performed on them. Most people don't realize that we all have considerable reptilian genetics or computer programs. The oldest part of the human brain is known by scientists as the R complex or the reptilian brain. It is the most obvious remnant of our reptilian genetic history and has a massive influence over our behavior. Scientists say that the reptilian brain represents a core of the nervous system, and from this comes character traits like aggressive and ritualistic behavior, territoriality, and the desire for a social hierarchy, all traits of the elite families who manipulate the world events to this day. Researcher Skip Lurgent wrote this in an internet article about the R complex. At least 5 human behaviors originate in the reptilian brain. Without defining them, I shall simply say that in human activities they find expression in obsessive compulsive behavior, personally day to day rituals and superstitious acts, slavish conformance to old ways of doing things, and ceremonial reenactments, obeisance to precedent, as in legal religious culture and other matters, and all manner of deceptions. This perfectly describes the behavior of the ruling families which own or control politics, banking, business, the military, and the media today. And so it should be because there are human reptilian hybrids. The Nephilim, the reptilian brain, is the source of cold blooded behavior, which has no empathy, with the victims of your actions, territoriality controlling the world around you, an obsession with hierarchical structures of the rule and control, aggression, and the idea that might is right, winner takes all. What you have in those character traits of the reptilian brain are the very characteristic traits displayed by the reptilian hybrids for thousands of years. You could not describe them better. Racism comes from the reptilian brain, and the aggression, violent sex that today's elite families indulge in big time. See Father Bush, Dick Cheney, the late President Gerald Ford, and other famous names I expose in my books. The Anunnaki reptilians have a fiercely hierarchical power structure, and they have imposed the same on humans. All the pomp, ceremony, and rituals that you see with royal families, religion, and the political establishment comes from the reptilians that seeded the royal bloodlines and created the political structure and religion to install their methods of rule and control. Can it really be a coincidence that the ruling bloodlines today manifest the classic traits of the reptilian brain, while at the same time the evidence points to them being reptilian hybrid bloodlines? The cosmologist Carl Sagan, who knew far more than he was telling, wrote in his book, The Dragons of Eden, "It does no good whatsoever to ignore the reptilian component of human nature, particularly our ritualistic and hierarchical behavior. On the contrary, the model may help us understand what human beings are really about." The interbreeding between the gods and humans is a constantly repeated theme in every part of the world and can be seen in the Old Testament narrative. Taken from the Sumerian of the sons of God, properly translated the sons of the gods, who interbred with humanity and created a hybrid bloodline called the Nephilim. The term Nephilim or Nephilim can be translated as those who descended or those who fell from the heavens. In Hebrew, myth, the Nephilim, the sons of the gods, are called Awim, which means devastators or serpents. The American researcher David Selaf emphasizes that the Nephilim are not the sons of gods, Beni Ha Elohim, but the offspring of the interbreeding between the daughters of men and the non humans the Bible calls the Elohim. The Nephilim were also known in ancient times as the Raphim, Amim, Zazumim, and Anukim, and they were all described as very tall or giant people. The biblical Goliath was a Raphim, and giant in Hebrew is Repha. This theme of giants is a constant one. Cave paintings found in places like Japan, South America, and the Sahara Desert depict giant people with round heads towering over human hunters. Bones of giant people between 8 and 12 feet tall have been found in the mountains in Minnesota and other locations. Scores of giant red-haired mummies were discovered in a cave near Lovelock in Nevada, and some were 7 feet tall. The Delaware Indians speak of a race of giants who once lived east of the Mississippi in the enormous cities, and the same descriptions of giants in ancient legends and accounts can be found everywhere. Credu Mutwa, expert in ancient African lore, tells the same stories from his culture. The Pewit Indian legends about these giants say they were cannibals. They would even dig up the Pewit dead from their graves and eat them, the accounts claim. Stories of Atlantis include tales of red-haired giants who acted like vampires, and the giant Nephilim were associated with cannibalism and blood drinking, just like the ruling bloodlines are today, as I shall be detailing. Of course, this must be the case. The ancient Nephilim and the families who control the modern world are the same genetic tribe or computer program. Most accounts say that the giants were unfriendly, even hostile, to the rest of the population, and they were often associated with strange craft that sound very much like flying saucers of modern UFO accounts. Genesis tells us that the sons of gods married the daughters of men before the flood, as well as afterwards, and Numbers called the Nephilim the sons of the Anak, or descendants of the Anakim or Anunnaki. According to the scholar and author Zechariah Sitchin, who has written many books on the Sumerian tablets, the term men of renown in the Genesis passage refers to the Nephilim should read. From its Sumerian origin, men of the sky vehicles, this puts rather a different complexion on the whole story and makes a great deal more sense of it. The Genesis reference to heroes of old is also relevant. The word hero comes from the Egyptian term hem, which, according to researchers Willis Budge, was applied to the king as a representative of the sun god, and the term clearly has the inference of a crossbreed race. The writer Homer, in the 8th to 19th century BC, wrote that the heroes were exalted above the race of common men. The poet Pindar, from 518 to 438 BC, used the term hero or hem to describe a race between the gods and men. Flavius Josephus, the first century writer and historian, said this of one of the Genesis references to the interbreeding between gods and human women. For many angels of God accompanied with women and beget sons that proved unjust and dispersers of all that was good, on an account of the confidence they had in their own strength. For the tradition is that these men did what resembled the acts of those women the Grecians call giants. The term angel, which means messenger, became associated with these non human entities, reptilian and otherwise, in the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Old Testament. The phrase sons of the gods is translated as angelos, or angels. The name for Sumer in the tablets is Ger, which has been translated as the land of the Lord of the blazing rockets, and is also the land of the watchers, Ger. The term watchers is often used to describe the ancient gods, and today some people who claim to have been abducted by reptilians and other non-human entities say that they have described themselves as watchers or custodians. The Egyptian name for their gods, the Natiru, translates literally as watchers. There were said to be good and bad watchers, and many were described in reptilian terms. In a Dead Sea Scroll fragment translated by the Hebrew scholar Robert Eisenman, there is a description of a watcher called Belial, who is described as the prince of darkness and the king of evil. He is said to be terrifying in his appearance, like a serpent with a visage like a viper. One of the main angelic groups in the Hebrew lore is the seraphim, or fiery serpents, and the watchers are very much connected to the description of serpents. In the Persian teachings, they also talk about a being they describe as the old serpent having 2 feet, just as the ancient Book of Enoch features walking serpents. Many other scholars suggested that the Book of Enoch in its present form was written around the 2nd century BC, but it comes from much older accounts. The Scottish explorer James Bruce located 3 copies of the book in 1773, and fragments of 10 Enoch manuscripts were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls discovered between 1947 and 1956 at the Qumran in Israel, where the Essene community are said to have lived 2,000 years ago. The text describes Enoch as the 7th from Adam and recounts events before the flood. Most interestingly, the Book of Enoch describes the fall of the Watchers, the angels who fathered the Nephilim, and it says that the fallen angels asked Enoch to intercede on their behalf with God. One of the sections is called the Book of the Watchers. It tells of the interaction between the fallen angels and humans and how they started to beget children. And it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied that in those days were born unto them beautiful and commonly daughters. The angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men and beget us children. And Simjaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then swear they all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were in all 200, who descended in the days of Jard on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves mutually imprecations upon it. The plan they would not abandon is still unfolding today, and the interbreeding is almost certainly the source of the belief in the original sin, which says everyone is born a sinner. The interbreeding produced the Nephilim of Genesis, or what the Book of Enoch calls the Anakim or Anak, the giants, the Anunnaki, human crossbreeds. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 elk, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. In the ancient Hebrew text, the book of Noah, and its derivative, the book of Enoch, a strange birth is described of a non human child who turns out to be Noah of the Great Flood fame. References to this also appear in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which included material from the book of Enoch. The strange child the text describes as the son of Lamech. He is said to be unlike a human being and more like the children of the angels in heaven. Lamech's child, Noah, is described as white skinned and blonde haired, with eyes that made the whole house shine like the sun. Reptilian beings with shining eyes and glowing bodies are described by Kridu Mutwa in his African accounts, ancient and modern. This description of the reptilians having eyes and bodies that shine like the sun is one possible origin of the sun god worship performed by the reptilian hybrid bloodlines since ancient times and continued today by the elite families. Although there are multiple levels to sun worship depending on how high you are in the hierarchy of knowledge, blonde haired, blue eyed beings with laser like eyes is a description of mysterious people or gods, which spans thousands of years to the present day and appears in cultures across the world. Lamech questioned his wife about the father of the child Noah. Behold, I thought then within my own heart that conception was due to the watchers and the holy ones, and to the Nephilim, and my heart was troubled within me because of this child. The bloodlines of Noah are reptilian human hybrids. Many peoples claim they are descendants from Noah, descendants from the reptilian watchers and Anunnaki. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, Noah is described as looking like the children of the fallen angels of heaven, whose conception was due to the watchers and to the Nephilim. The book of Enoch says that Noah was warned about the coming deluge and instructed by an angel, the Anunnaki genetics expert Enki, according to Mesopotamian accounts, that he must escape and his seed preserved for all the generations of the world. It makes sense that Noah and his many other aliases in different accounts of the flood will be warned by a reptilian god if he was a reptilian hybrid. We can also see why the bloodline of Noah is considered so important by so many groups, though the masses will have no idea of the real significance. The Book of Enoch was banned by the Roman Church, which sought to deny the earlier Christian belief in the existence of flesh and blood angels, fallen angels occupying physical bodies and interbreeding with humans. This was to stop people understanding the true situation. Freemasons have always looked upon Enoch as one of their legendary founders, and the very name Enoch means initiated. The Ethiopian text, the Kabra Nagast, is thousands of years old, and it refers to the enormous size of the babies produced from the sexual genetic unions between humans and the gods. It tells how the daughters of Cain, son of Noah, with whom the angels had conceived, were unable to bring forth their children, and they died. It describes how some of these giant babies were delivered by a cesarean section. Having split open the bellies of their mothers, they came forth by their navels. In the Shahnameh, or Book of Kings, the legendary history of Iran completed in AD 1010 by the Arab poet Ferdowsi, he describes the birth of a baby called Zal, the son of a king called Sam. The king is horrified by the unearthly appearance of his child, who has a very large body as clean as silver, hair as white as an old man's and like snow, and a face compared with the sun. Sam calls his son a demon child, a child of the divas, or the watchers. So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's episode. I thought that we were going to be able to briefly get through the remaining portions of this chapter, but we still have maybe about 4 or 5 pages to thoroughly read through. So I'm sure that we will get through them in part 4. If you guys enjoyed today's read, do me a favor, smash that thumbs up button and subscribe to the platform. As always, we do appreciate the love and support. And with that being said, please be mindful, please be aware out there, and I will see you guys in the next Library of Awakening episode. I know some of the perspectives that I share may be as challenging for you as they once were for me. But isn't that the beauty of exploration? Every perspective, no matter how unconventional, has something valuable to contribute to it if it's shared. Knowledge is not absolute. It's a living, breathing phenomena, shaped and reshaped over time. The important thing is not always be right, but to always be curious, explore freely, share boldly, and learn deeply. And don't rely solely on others to validate your discoveries. Stand firm in integrity, even in the face of criticism. Remember that growth always means embracing the humility to admit when we're wrong. Learning from our errors is not a setback, it's the very essence of our progress. So, welcome to the journey. May this space inspire you to ask questions, explore the unknown, and most importantly, to awaken. This is the Library of Awakening,